I'm starting a series on leadership practices and characteristics. You can find some of those already on my website. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I would like to try to tell you in each video what I'm trying to accomplish in the video. And this video is titled, Leadership is Required to Plan a Real Startup. You'll see I've written several articles and done some videos on what a real startup is, what the difference between a real startup and just a startup is. And I believe that there are some characteristics that make that distinction. So we're going to talk about leading a real startup today and why planning is a very important part of that. The problem is lots of entrepreneurs don't know what it takes to start a real business, and they're not very good planners. So one of the things that we try to instill in folks who want to be real planners and real leaders and start a real entrepreneurial business is how planning is so important. We'll cover that in a couple of videos. So today it's leadership is required to plan a real startup. I want to get started by saying this may shock you, but you may not be the right person to be the leader of this startup. And it's very important that you think about that and analyze that, probably with some outside help, maybe a mentor or an advisor of some kind, to determine if you're the right person to lead this real startup. You may be the right person to have come up with the idea. You may be a great inventor. You might be a scientist or whatever it might take to come up with the idea, but you may not be the right person to actually lead the company and be the real leader for this startup. So think about that, and if you have decided perhaps that you need to bring someone in that role, then it's important to figure out what that job description is, how that person fits into the plan. Do we have good chemistry together, and how do we define that chemistry, and how do we incentivize that person to be the leader? In some cases, in a startup environment, that can be done with equity. You might like to think it's sweat equity, but it needs to be more than that. So it can be equity, but usually most people want to get some compensation for actually taking on a company leadership role. And by the way, I think just to sort of get it quite clear here, if that leadership vacuum is not properly understood and recognized and filled, then you probably have a startup company that's destined to fail from the very beginning. So lack of true leadership is one of the main reasons these companies are not performing and not succeeding at the rate that some people advertise, and therefore the number of real startups each year is quite a bit lower than might be advertised or expected, because these real startups don't have real leaders. In previous posts and blogs, I've described some key leadership characteristics which you should think about if you're going to try to be the leader of this company, or if you need to bring someone in to become the leader of this company because you see that's not your strength. Then think about these 6 items that you'd like to have in that leadership candidate. You've got to be an outstanding communicator to start with, and that means being able to communicate with all of your stakeholder audiences, not just your management, not just your staff and your organization, but you've got to build communication channels with lots of different stakeholders, including people in the community, and you've got to build a company culture, and you've got to build teamwork around that culture. Number 2, you've got to be a solid planner. You've got to be able to build the plan that is going to include all of the different elements of the strategic plan for the company. And you've got to build a good mission statement and a good vision statement. Mission being now, vision being 5 years out. Lay out those plans for all the company associates to see and to buy into. Number 3, build teamwork through active planning exercises and chunking the company into workable management units, which are of a size that they can actually take a bite, deal with a problem, and make real success or successful suggestions in dealing with that problem. So you've got to have chunks of management team that are balanced between responsibility and accountability. And number 4, preach and practice time management. Do it yourself and preach it to your organization. Never be late for meetings. Always have an agenda. Assign a note taker and make sure everyone in attendance gets a copy with action options and assignments agreed. And number 5, document all agreements. Documentation is extremely important. In a previous video, we talked about pale ink being better than a good handshake. Document all agreements. Last, number 6, measure performance. Measure performance at all levels of the organization with metrics that are visible and easy to understand. The old saying is, lead or get out of the way. Really holds true with leadership in a real entrepreneurial startup. So if that's not you, find the right person to fill that position in your leadership structure and your leadership team. You can learn more about leadership practices and characteristics at Lienhart Leadership Consulting. And you can go to my website, bradlienhart.com, to see other videos on leadership practices and some blogs that cover the same topic. Thank you.